Boom. All right. Quick little wipey wipe. Wipey wipey. La 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 la. All right. So let's see. Next thing we're going to do is I've got this court bouillon. We're going to start doing our deep poaching here. We're going to start poaching our salmon and start talking about poaching. So let me go ahead, and I've got a little container here that I'm going to strain into, and I've got a ladle, and basically I'm just going to, maybe I'll do it over by the sink. I think that's kind of a better idea. I'm going to place this down in a sink. I need to clean that knife up. Just realized I didn't get that guy. And I'm going to go ahead and strain some of this out. And I need to save some of this stuff, so don't let me forget. I have a better idea than this cylinder. I'm just going to strain into this pot I was using for water earlier. I can fit a little more in there. Here goes the rest, or almost the rest. Again, court bouillon. Right now, this is just vegetable stock. I haven't really turned it into court bouillon yet. And I'll tell you why, because I haven't added acid or salt to this yet. So this is just straight vegetable stock, to be honest. But what I've done is I threw some fish in there, and I'm getting some fish aroma here. It's kind of a quick fish fumet. So I've got all of these little scraps in here. I don't usually keep this stuff. You can do with it as you will, okay? But on the other side, I have got a beautiful looking vegetable stock, okay? Now, before I turn this into a court bouillon, I need to save some of this stuff for another recipe. That's why I left the salt and acid out, to be quite honest. But it's better to add the acid in late because you don't want it to evaporate away. Let me adjust this so you guys can see what I'm doing here. I'm just taking a little bit of this stock so I can use it for something else. I don't need that much. So that's just over there for later. Gosh, I got a bunch more over here. I didn't even see this. So I've got plenty of stock in this. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an insane amount of salt to this, okay? I want it to taste like pickle brine, okay? So check this out. I've got some regular stuff or something else, but this is super, super salty, okay? You see all that salt? I might even add a little more, okay? I'm going to turn a little flame on to help, we're going to help dissolve that salt in there. Let me just disperse so we can kind of dissolve the salt. And I'm going to go ahead and add some acid as well. I like to add the acid late. This is just distilled vinegar, but I could use other vinegars. I really need a punch of vinegar here, and I wanted to use this guy up. I only have that much left, so this will be perfect. So I'm going to add a little distilled vinegar. That's just got a little kick to it. And I'm also going to add a little bit of wine. And I think I need a little wine too, because this is, I think sometimes we forget that this is Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour. And, you know, I come down as this bummer of a guy that just wants to cook, cook, cook. Sometimes we got to have a little fun in life, guys. That's what this is all about. So let's do that. Let's partake in a little wine. I think it's about time. Let's see. I've got a St. Ray. I think I have this on another show too. This is a Chenin Blanc from, I believe it's from Clarksburg. And we see this at Magpie all the time. I get this at Magpie all the time. It's been a while. Magpie just opened up again. Good to see. Yes, right. A little for the pot too. I thought it was all for me. Gosh, I'm going to cook with a little bit of that too. Chenin Blanc, it's a dry, sparkly, not sparkly, but what am I trying to say? Dry, acidic tasting wine. Let's go ahead and have a little snort of this, if you will, people. Oh, happy Friday. Oh, damn, it's Monday. That's right. And that's what this is all about. Okay, let me put this over here. I'm going to taste my court bouillon right now. Let me stir that salt a little bit more. Dissolve. And we're going to give it a little taste. Okay, this is where all my flavor for my salmon is coming from. It's not coming from anything else that I can sprinkle on or anything like that. I got to get it from this poaching liquid. Woo. When I used to do this in culinary school, I would make this stuff super, super strong, right? Because, you know, again, I want to kind of demonstrate, you know, this delivers flavor, a lot of it, right? So I would make this stuff and I would tell my students, just taste one drop of this stuff. I'm telling you, it's like pickle brine, you don't want a lot. And every once in a while, somebody would do what I just did. I just took a big old spoonful and I don't know why. I always warn students not to do that. And then I did it. All right, so this is a functioning court bouillon over there. There is plenty of salt in there, that guy. There is plenty of acidity to it. It's got some nice flavors behind it. I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and drop my fish in. Now with this, notice that my liquid is not boiling. It is just hot. Let me pull this over here. And what I want here is about 170 degrees. And I am just going to kind of eyeball this. And the way I usually eyeball this is I begin to see those little tiny bubbles kind of coming up to the surface. And that's what I'm looking for. If this was water, you'd really be able to see it. It would look like a glass of Sprite, right? All those little bubbles are attaching to the side and it's rolling up. That's going to give me the temperature I'm looking for. When we are poaching, guys, we are looking for a temperature that's around 170 degrees. We're looking for kind of a low, slow temperature. That's low and slow, right? But the idea is it's sitting low and slow, cooking in this flavorful liquid. And the longer it sits in there and takes its time cooking, the more it's going to soak up flavor. And it's also going to, because it's so slow, it's not like boiling water in there. It's not overcooking those proteins, right? The proteins are just going to kind of firm up, and when they firm up, they're going to capture moisture. If you boil a piece of fish like this, what you're going to do is those proteins are going to firm up and squeeze all the moisture out, and you're going to get a dry piece of fish. Right now is what I'm talking about. I'm seeing little bubbles around the edges here. You can see it kind of rising on the top. This is my visual cue, and we'll kind of go through all of these. We'll do poaching first here, but this is my visual cue telling me that I'm at poaching temperature. I'm going to drop this ice cold fish in there, and I'm going to try and get it back up to poaching temperature again. And then I'm probably just going to turn it off and let it sit. Now I might have a little too much liquid in here, but I didn't want to have too little. And so I'm fitting them all in there. And let me just kind of scooch a guy over. This is called a fish spatula, and now you know why, okay? I'm gonna get in there and just delicately coax this one over there in the corner. I don't really want them touching so much or on top of each other because they'll kind of glue together. And now that I've got them in there, I'm gonna give that a little shake, and I'm gonna turn this down. In fact, I'm gonna go onto a lower flame over here, a real low flame, because it's starting to boil over here. I'm going too hot. We want to go super low and slow and let this cook over time, okay? When you ever hear the term like New Orleans crab boil, by the way, you know, when you do that, you're buying like that Old Bay spice blend or whatever and putting it in water and simmering it. Hey, isn't that a court bouillon too, right? A flavored cooking liquid, right? And when you're doing it with you know, shrimp or what have you, you know, you're talking about your New Orleans crab boil and all of that, your shrimp boil and all. When you're doing that stuff, you don't want to boil it, guys. I know people use that term a lot, but there's not a meat I can think of that I really want to boil. It's always simmer. It's always poach, guys. We never want to boil meat, okay? So try to get that word out of your lexicon if you're using that to describe what we're doing here, because this is very different from boiling. And I kind of make a big deal about it because it is kind of a big deal. And so let's kind of break this on down while this poaches off over here, okay? Now, I mentioned poaching is about 170 degrees, okay? That's a pretty low temperature. When we're poaching things, what are we poaching? Usually delicate proteins, things that are gonna, you know, that are never gonna work on a grill or something like that, you know, or they might, you know, salmon, I can grill salmon, sure, but that intense heat, it can kind of overdo and dry the outside. When I poach it, there's not a single part of it that's overdone if I poach properly, right? It's all nice and juicy and perfect all the way through. And another thing about it is when I cook this thing, I am able to infuse flavors. That's what poaching is about getting flavor into things. And you just saw me do that with this really, really strong court bouillon. I keep using these words so you remember them, right? So delicate proteins, low and slow, we can infuse flavors. Another example of a delicate protein is an egg. Really easy to overcook those. You throw an egg into boiling water. First, it gets knocked into pieces, but even if it held its shape, it would turn into a golf ball, right? And so we tend to poach eggs out of the shell, right? right? So that's another thing, right? So that's what kind of what poaching's about, and it's very specific to those things: cooking meats, cooking delicate proteins, eggs, things like that, right? Simmer is another one that I think I should talk about. Okay, so simmer is above this poach. You saw that poach kind of starting to rock and roll and really almost start simmering there. I saw one bubble come up. That's your simmer. It's cruising about 200 degrees, right? And maybe getting close to 210. It's just under that boil, right? There's a range of simmer there. And what is that simmer for? That's usually for extracting flavors, right? If I make a chicken stock, I want it kind of at that higher temperature. We just made the core bouillon at a simmer temperature, right? So we're seeing activity. It's like bloop, 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 bloop. That's your visual cue for a simmer. Remember, visual cue for poach was those tiny little bubbles like Sprite, okay? And then simmering. So again, flavor extraction. Other things that we simmer are sauces, like starch-based sauces. Sometimes we need to simmer the starchiness out of them. That's another thing. And the other thing that we simmer, and I do remember talking about this in a class, we simmer low, slow braised items like stewed items and things like that to kind of break down connective tissue in tough meats. That's another thing that should just be like bloop, 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 right? Again, about 200 degrees to 210, kind of in that neighborhood right there is your simmer, okay? And it's very specific what we simmer. I don't simmer things I want to poach, and I don't poach things I want to simmer, right? Finally, let me take a look at my poach here. I'm just going to put a tiny little flame under there, and it's cruising along just fine. I don't mind if it takes extra time. Let me get a little sip here. Finally, we're going to talk about boil. Before we do that, I got to cool off before I boil. Oh yeah, that's good. Oh yeah. So boiling, of course, 212 degrees, visual cue. It's a rapid rolling boil, right? What do you think a boil looks like? It's just rolling, man. And so you have a visual cue for all three, poach, simmer, and boil, okay? When we are boiling, there's only certain things we boil, okay? Like I said, you don't boil meats. If somebody tells me they're boiling shrimp over here or something, I'm like, freaking, whoa, get over here. We got to turn it down. You know, it's got to poach, right? We never poach or boil anything like that. But what do we boil? We boil things like grains. We boil potatoes, right? Things that are kind of hard on the outside that we need to kind of penetrate, you know, that kind of a thing. Let's see, what else do we boil? Vegetables. When I'm cooking green vegetables and things like that in water, just like these spring onions that I just did, I want them in and I want them to keep boiling, and I want them to go super, super fast at a high temp. That's what I want to boil with, right? And get them out of there and get them cooked as quick as I can, right? It retains nutrients and color and texture and all of that stuff if I can cook them fast. So I always want really boiling water if I'm blanching vegetables or something like that. There's not a lot of things that we boil in the kitchen, as you can see. I mentioned like the vegetables and hard starchy things like potatoes and grains and things like that. Gosh, what else, you know? Deep fry, you know, that's kind of boiling, but at a higher temperature. When we're talking about water-based liquids, that's about it, guys. It's very, very specific and very important to know the difference between, again, poach, simmer, and boil, and what we use them for. That's valuable stuff, right? And you never hear that conversation on Food Network, right? Let me kind of just taste my core bouillon. It's probably soaked up a little salmon flavor. It's probably getting quite delicious over here. And then we're going to set up a station here to make a shallow poach item, right? My halibut cheeks. And we're going to make a spring onion beurre blanc with that, basically, or a butter sauce. Now, this core bouillon, I should mention, once this is done, all I can really do with it is poach more salmon or more fish or something like that. This thing is so salty and so acidic. If I took it and tried to make a sauce out of it or a soup or something, I don't know who would want to drink it, right? So it's really only good for poaching, and we would use this in restaurants, make a big batch of it, and then I can have a poached item and just kind of drop it to order, let it poach for a little while, and then serve that thing, and then you know, we're all good. Or, you know, a lot of the times in the hotel, we would sell whole poached salmon and chilled, right? So we poach them off. And the big thing about poaching, the way you really get flavor into stuff, it's that idea of leftovers are always better the next day. If we poach something and we let it cool in the poaching liquid, that liquid is going to penetrate the fish or whatever it is you're poaching, and the liquid become one, and the flavor is through and through, every bit of it, right? And so you're going to see me kind of just, this is off the heat, basically. I'm going to just kind of feel a little bit of this fish, and if it's feeling like it's about done, I'm going to consider it done, and it's going to, the carryover heat or that residual heat inside is going to continue cooking these as we go. These were very thin pieces. Oh yeah, this is done. These were thin pieces, you know, it didn't take the heat very long to penetrate, you know, that much salmon. That's how thick this stuff is. Yeah, this is done. So I'm just not going to turn on the heat. I'm going to allow these to just cool off in that liquid. They're just going to get cooler and cooler as I go, and I'll put them away once I've cooled them. But I think what I might do is put them over here on the other counter. That's what I shall do. Did I spill a little something? Oh, something fell off a little piece of paper. All right, so the first fish is done, and we'll just kind of cut into that at the end of it. Again, this is like, it's just going to be chilled and served all week long at the house for lunches and pasta and things like that. The next one is more like what you would see in a restaurant, okay? Or you could actually pull something like this off in at home, you know, entertaining for a friend or two. So let me get another sip here. And I'm going to need another pan. Oh, let's see. I don't know that I'll need it just yet. Let me do another couple of things. I remember what I need to do. I've got a little bit of setup here. I showed you those spring onions earlier that we trimmed up. I've got to kind of show you how I cut these guys down, because this is going to be kind of an accompaniment that's going along with our fish. They're going to cook along with it, okay? And so those are the cut ones. Let me kind of show you what I did with those. So again, they had those long flowing green tops, and I saved some of those long green flowing tops for a garnish on this and other things that I have around here. But for now, I've got this root stem here, or this root end. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, darn, I never did clean my knife. Hold on, guys. Bad chef. That never happens to Rachel Ray. I'm sure she's very nice. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the top of this off, and then I'll cut it in half lengthwise. And I want to kind of really be careful as I do this. Now, one thing I want to point out is when I cut that, I left the root end intact. When I cut that little root end off, I just barely did anything, right? So the root end is holding this whole thing together. That's going to be very important for this guy later on. And then I want to kind of make sure, I'm going to cut it and make sure that I can kind of have a little piece of the root in each piece. And I didn't cut it all the way. I just cut like 1/3 and then another third this way. And the 3 pieces have a little root, and then I pull it apart. So it's kind of natural shreds at the end, okay? And that's kind of what I did with this whole bowl full of them. Boom, if you can see those, I was trying to steer it around. And then let me get the other end of this guy, and let's see, I got another one to cut too. Boom, and boom, and shred. Kind of different. And then take off the fuzz. Don't cut off too much. Keep that root end intact. And I'm going to cut those into thirds and pull it apart in shreds. The root is holding all the pieces together. Boom, boom. I love just natural flowing things like that. Ooh, that one didn't want to shred too well. All right. And so there are my spring onions. And I think I can start preparing things. Let me get everything out for this dish. So here are my halibut cheeks. I'm going to put a little slice of ginger in the mix, and that's just going to be kind of like a bay leaf. I'll pull it out later. I've got a little bit of butter, a little bit of that white wine, that's St. Ray, okay? I've got that pesto that I made earlier, and I can use this in other things around the house. And then I've got those spring onions over here, and I'm also going to just throw a little bit of thyme in the mix, if you guys don't mind, okay? And I'll throw that in when I throw in those spring onions, if that's all right, okay? So with that all being said, I think that's everything. Oh, the other thing that I need is a little bit of broth. That vegetable stock that I made earlier, remember, this doesn't have salt or vinegar in it. And I need my wine. Let's have a little taste of that. Let's see who's out there. I think I saw Alvaro a second ago. Lily's out there. Roberta's out there. Johnny, hey, how's it going, everybody? Hope you guys are enjoying. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. All my love, guys. This next dish isn't going to take us very long to do when everything is set up. We have done saute station before, and we kind of talked about that. When everything is kind of set up, the dish start to finish doesn't take very long, and this makes all restaurant service possible. If we think about it, all restaurant service is kind of like fast food, right? Everything's all cut up and ready to go, and you're just throwing in little bits and bobs, you know, into a pan and cooking it off and making it happen really, really fast. This is what we call a la minute service, and this is an a la minute style of poaching, okay, called shallow poaching. So what you got here, I think I just went through all the ingredients. I haven't left anything out. We are going to start with a pan, and let me get back up on another screen here. Sorry, guys. We're going to start with a wide, shallow pan so I can lay out all of my halibut cheeks in there again. And there they are, right? The stars of the show, okay? Just chunky little tender, delicious bits of heaven right there is what they are, okay? Now, I want this pan cold because what I'm going to do, the first thing, I'm going to take a couple of cubes of butter and I'm going to smear butter inside this pan. If it's hot, the butter just slips and slides around there, and I kind of want to smush it in here. Smush it, get it all smushy. Spread that around. And this is going to kind of help, you know, things from sticking and whatnot. And it also kind of helps things spread out a little bit. Now, normally when I'm doing this, I usually teach this with a little bit of shallot next, chopped shallot. In this case, I'm going to add my spring onions to the mix. And they're going to be the bed that I'm cooking on. The fish is going to be on top of these guys. And then they're going to be served with the fish later on. That's part of my little vegetable today, okay? Let me just grab one thing. Let me put this over here. All right, so you can see everything is laid down in there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of salt to my halibut cheeks. And then I'm going to lay them on top of all of that deliciousness inside of there. So just a little salt, and I want to flip them and salt the other side as well. Flippy flip, flippity flip flip. I can only use one hand for flipping because I've got a salt hand and I've got a flip hand, a fish hand, if you will. Fish hand, that's something I don't want. Nobody wants a fish hand. Okay, so I'm seasoned on both sides. You know, you could take this any direction you want to, right? And in they go on top of the spring onions that I found. By the way, these spring onions, I picked them up at Route 64 farm stand in Sacramento. Route 64 is a urban farmstead, if you will. This couple basically just started a farm on a plot of land off of you know, it's over there by 65th Street, but it's on 64th. And these guys are growing beautiful produce out there and selling them at farmers markets. I am actually going to be interviewing Randy Stannard this week on Between Two Stoves about Route 64. This is where I got my spring onion. So please show up. That will be, let's see, I'm talking to Randy on Thursday, Between Two Stoves with Randy Stannard. Okay, so far it was butter, it was spring onions. Now it's those seasoned pieces of halibut cheek. What I'm going to throw in there next, this is so simple, guys. Here's some of that liquid that I saved earlier. I need a little bit of cooking liquid here. So I poured that on in there. That was probably less than a cup. I actually have a little bit more that I can use for adjustments. So there's a little liquid. Another thing I need to have in there is a little bit of white wine. Again, acid is very important in these fish applications, seafood applications. It helps kind of denature those proteins or coagulate them, tighten them up, again, however you want to say it, okay? And so wine, very, very prevalent. Also, acid tastes good with fish. You have to, you know, if you know what I'm talking about, you must agree, right? I mean, it just does. Think of lemon with fish, right? It just makes sense. I'm going to set the wine over there just in case. And I've got my wine in there. The next thing I do is I'm going to put this on the stovetop. And I'm going to put a little bit of jet fuel under there. I'm going to turn it up to 11 basically and get this baby going. Oh, I left one thing out. I'm going to throw in a little bit of a little slice of ginger, just like that. Just open that up. And just for a little background flavor, I'm going to pull that out like a bay leaf later. Let me get that under there. I meant to put that in there. Now that the fire is on there, I want to get a lid. And this is going to be steaming up very quickly. As soon as it hits that boil, it's going to get very hot and heavy in there. I think I'll throw that extra little piece of ginger in. Why not? There's 2 pieces of ginger. We got to remember that. Got to remember that. Okay. I'm going to clean up while that's going. We just talked about boiling, simmering, and poaching. We talked about court bouillon. I got a shallow poach going right now with halibut cheeks and ginger and spring onions from Route 64 Farm Stand in Sacramento. It's a good day. I know things are a little crazy out there, but man, it's tasting pretty good in here to me so far today, guys. It keeps me sane. I'm so happy anybody at all joined me today the way things are going, guys. I really, really appreciate it. We are getting there. Let me turn that camera on the pan over here. I want to point out my butter's real cold over here, by the way, that butter. Nice and cold. Okay, I just set a little plate down as a landing zone for later. And let's just take a look and see if I'm even getting any steam in here yet. Just the tiniest wisp of steam at this point. I've got it cranked all the way on 11. As soon as it gets super hot though, all I need is steam in there. I'm going to turn it down. La, 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 la. While that's going, I'm going to mince up a little bit of green, of the spring onion green for the top. And before I do that, I am most definitely, you better believe, you know, I'm going to steal my knife, okay? Anytime I'm going to be doing herbs, I always steal my knife. I've been doing a lot of chopping in the class today. I got to redress my edge. Redress my edge's grievance, if you will. Grab one thing. And just a little bit of green for the top. This is going to be all green and white, by the way, anyway. But I kind of showed you 2 recipes today. As I'm going through this, I'm going straight across, really, really thin, paper thin. I love my green onions when they just look like paper. Now these guys, I call them green onions, spring onions. These guys get a little of that sliminess to them, and sometimes I'll do a little rinse with these guys to get that off of them. And then I'll dry them really good, and they really are just like dust, like scallion dust. It's beautiful. I'm going to kind of save those extra little pieces for later. And I'm just going to kind of save this in a bowl. And we'll just drop a little of that around the plate. This isn't going to be a fancy plate, guys. I really, you know, I'm not in this to do like Instagram plates here. You know, I'm in this to talk about technique here. And again, all of my recipes are like super, super simple, right? Very, very simple. Let's take a look at this pan. I know I got to be getting some heat going now, right? It's really going. So I'm going to turn that baby down and go low and slow and just let it steam in there. At this point, if I was working in a restaurant, hey, I got to fire my next pan. So I'm kicking this in the oven to keep cooking while I'm starting the next shallow poach dish or something. When I just took off that lid, by the way, I just got a big old breath of fish fume and wine and the onion and even, well, let me just, hold on. And ginger, dare I say, right? And so that fish is just cruising along right there. And we're going to finish it. We're going to pull that fish out. It's going to kind of rest. It'll kind of kick out a little bit of tasty juice, right? We're going to take this liquid and we are going to make something out of it that is just going to be awesome, okay? So this is going to be pan sauce dynamics. Let's see, I need one more little landing place here. Use this fella here. There it is. Okay, so let me just check this again. I think what I will do is I got to kill a little time. So this is what I usually do when I'm killing time. before I get back to this. Hold on. All right, enough of that. Let's check this fish out.